You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious!
Now, I've said this many times before when we interview people, that we like to interview people of interest. We have interviewed, and I know I've said this before, we've interviewed sports people, we've interviewed politicians, we've interviewed people from all sections and genres of life, and today is no different, because this person I'm about to introduce announced his retirement from the very important job that he had in the community, and we thought, I thought I'd like to speak to him, because he's a controversial figure, and everyone's a controversial figure, or we wouldn't speak to them. In some ways, people are controversial, and I'd like to welcome I suppose he still is the Victorian Secretary of the CFMEU. Incidentally, CF, it should be CFMMEU, but it's just CFMEU. He is still the Victorian Secretary of that, I think, unless I've missed something in the interim. And I'd like to welcome John Setka to You Cannot Be Serious. Hello, John.
Hello, Sam. Thanks, mate.
What are you?
I'm still the State Secretary till the end of the year.
Oh, till the end of the year. Well, that's the first bit of research I should have done. I should have known that, but I just saw in the tissues that you were retiring, and you've been the Secretary since 2012?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. At the end of my term, it'll be 12 years.
Yes. I mention a lot of facts to people we interview, and most of them are wrong. And they say, why don't you do your research? I said, because the stuff I do my research on sometimes is not updated, and sometimes it's incorrect. Now, first of all, why are you retiring?
Well, Sam,
you're 60.
Yeah, well, look, I'm going to be 60 in September this year. The 6th for anyone that wants to know anyway. And look, I said right from the start of my last term, that this was going to be my last term. I mean, my dad retired at 55 from the construction industry. So I couldn't retire at 55. So I always said when I turn 60, I'm going to retire. Works out perfectly. My term ends at the end of the year, and I'll be 60, and it's a good time for me to go. To unions at an all-time high membership, and it's in a good spot.
Now, I'll just get on to your dad in a minute, but what are you going to do then? At 60, you've got to do something, John. What are your interests? Could I just say, as we're on the eve of Taylor Swift taking the city by storm, you're not a Swiftie, eh? You're not going along to that.
I wouldn't know one song. If you blowtorch me now, I wouldn't be able to tell you one song she sings.
Well, have you had anything to do with the construction of the joint, or making sure everything's... you kept well out of that?
No, I haven't. I'm just trying to avoid the traffic, I suppose. Yeah, but no, I don't.
So you're not a Swiftie. What would you listen to as a matter of interest?
Oh, look, I grew up...
If you sat down with a glass of bitterly cold, what would you listen to?
AC/DC, my favourite.
AC/DC,
yes.
Yeah,
AC/DC. Good old Aussie band. Yes. I remember they used to open up playing in the Footscray Mall once, so...
AC/DC did?
Yes, yeah, AC/DC, yeah. And I think it was outside the old Commonwealth Bank there, so... Then a lot of people don't realise once they went to America, that's when they become real international sort of band. But
they did. They were huge in America.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
They're my favourites still to this day. All-time classics.
Now, this is what you're known as. You're known as a controversial figure in the Australian trade union movement. You're known as a very strong supporter of the grassroots level of people in the community. You are a strong advocate for political and legal opponents that are against you, and you are, someone said, the most fair dinkum union person in the country. That's what they say about you on that side, and then others have said your detractors. I can resonate with this, because this is vaguely what they say about me, except you're far more important than me. Your opponents say you're a bully, you break the law to further union interests, and your criticism on remarks on domestic violence got you in so much trouble, or that you got expelled from the ALP in 2019. So that's the good, and that's the famous, and that's the infamous. Yeah. So I want to know, John, I know Did you get started because your dad lost his life in the 1970 collapse of the Westgate Bridge? I think your dad's just left us recently, has he?
Yes, yeah, he survived. He was one of the survivors of the Westgate collapse.
But he passed recently, did he?
Yes, last year, yeah.
Yes, well, we offer you our condolences for that.
Thank you.
So did you get involved in the... well, you couldn't have got involved in the union movement because of that, but because you're too young. But as a result of that, did you take an interest in the safety and what goes on for the rank and file who actually helped build the country?
Look, it was a big factor for me. I mean, I remember I was in Bubs actually when the bridge collapsed, and I remember back then, you have vivid memories of certain things, and I remember, there was a lot of union people that actually looked after my dad after that. He was one of the 18 survivors, and I remember later on, my dad always got sort of pretty good jobs because he'd had a back operation, he had some serious injuries, so...
From the collapse?
From the collapse, yeah. And to see the union, back then sort of look after him and make sure he had a good job, and he'd be on a job, say, as an Mac driver or as a rigger, just to see that was even years later was fantastic for me. And I sort of thought, how's this? He survived the tragedy and his union has sort of looked after him. So, when I seen that, and safety, obviously, I go to the memorials and you see 35 other families there every year, and you sort of think, I could have grew up without a dad. I could have, like I used to, when I'd go to Williamstown, I'd drive past that memorial and I think, gee, I'm so lucky my dad's name's not on there. So it sort of does drive you a bit, when you sort of experience all that.
I was in a pub with Doug Wade, who played football for Geelong. He and I were business partners. I was in a pub in 1970 in Footscray, and we actually came out and saw the dust rising into the sky. We didn't see it collapse, but we were there about 10 seconds out in the footpath looking at the dust in the... and that was as a result of construction negligence, was it?
It was engineering, because what they worked out is the bridge was going to not join up properly, like one bit was going to be higher than the other. Yeah. So they whacked a whole heap of concrete blocks on one end and then started unloosening the bolts. So that obviously we know how that ended. So that was really an engineering problem, and the workers on the bridge had actually expressed a concern, and one of the people they'd expressed a concern about bolts turning blue and creaking, and one of the engineers that was there who actually died on the bridge sort of said, this bridge is safe, I bet my life on it, and he was one of the ones that got killed on the bridge.
How ironic.
Yeah, so obviously the union back then didn't have the engineering expertise we have now to be able to send out experts out there to get a second opinion. That bridge collapse actually redefined Victoria, like the health and safety. We've got some of the toughest health and safety laws. The trade union movement is seen as stronger here, and I think a lot of that was because of that. It's Australia's worst industrial accident, and I think it galvanised the whole trade union movement and workers and that, and people started taking safety seriously after that.
It'd be fair to say the trade union movement is strongest here because of someone like your good self, John, who takes no prisoners.
Eureka Stockade, maybe? It was in Victoria.
They say, just as a matter of interest, I don't know if this is apocryphal or not, but the bridge is in a constant state of repair 24/7. There's bolts falling out of it. I don't want to, I'm sure it's very stringently overseen now, but it's quite a continuing job to keep the thing in the air.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure if that's too extravagant to say that, but...
Look, they've done some major works on there, sort of upgrades. They put obviously the suicide barriers because there was a lot of people sort of jumping off, unfortunately. Yeah. But they also strengthened it and done the upgrades. It's like the Sydney Harbour Bridge. They're constantly maintaining it. When you think built in 1970, it's pretty old. Like the bridge is over 50 years old, so there'd be a lot of maintenance. There'd be full-time maintenance crews on there.
Now, the CFMEU is an adjunct or is a continuation of Norm Gallagher's Builders Labour's Federation, isn't it? I remember Norm, who said the light towers at the MCG would never be built, as we go and watch Taylor Swift tomorrow night and see the lights blazing. So, Norm, did you know Norm?
I worked, that's where I started my career as a union official with the BLF under Norm.
Yeah.
So, That's why I've got the old. That's where my career started.
I see. I haven't. John is pointing to a tattoo on his forearm. A very look like Popeye. Your forearms are huge. But I haven't bothered to read what's on your body yet, John. I might have a crack at that after we finish.
Yeah. So that's where I started my career, working for Norm Gallagher.
Did you? And what did Norm teach you?
Oh, look! I found
to belt the capitalists.
Yeah. Look, there was probably a bit of that. I mean, but
belt the fat cats.
Not really. There is this perception of that, but I mean, he was a pragmatist, really, when you think about it. And you think he sort of took the builder's labourer out of the gutter and made him a highly paid, skilled labourer. You know, some of the highest paid, in the country, and safety, banning asbestos. I mean. Yeah. He saved a lot of landmarks in Melbourne, like the Vic Market. That wouldn't be there if it wasn't for Norm. The pool, the Carlton pools and all that. So a lot of the Regent wouldn't be there if it wasn't for Norm Gallagher. So he left his mark, and he's you talked to a lot of the old timers that were around in the 60s and 70s. You couldn't say a bad word about Norm. They all loved him because he looked after them.
Now you're sounding like as though you're a pussycat. John, that's a very calm gentleman, and you probably are on various aspects of your life, but it says you are a pervasive power over the construction companies. That is, and it says that you will go to any means to enforce what you want, even if it is to break the law. Is that a fair comment, and is that justified?
Look, it's probably taken out of context when they say break the law. We might break some industrial laws. I mean, hardly a crime of the century you get sent to Alcatraz for or hung for. I mean, I've had politicians sort of say we're the biggest reactivist lawbreakers, but I mean, they're not criminal laws, they're industrial laws. And I mean, sometimes to get an outcome, the law's not there to sort of protect workers sometimes, and sometimes, if the difference is between me preserving someone's life or making sure they go home safe that day, or I've got to break the law to go on that building site, I will do that, I'd rather do that than have to answer to that family why their son or daughter ain't coming home because I had to abide by this little shitty law that was designed to never let us win. It's a bit like playing footy and you kick all these goals and they say, well, sorry, that don't count now because we've just moved the goalpost. So when you've got bad laws, I mean, my view is if you've got bad laws, it's your obligation to sort of break them.
It's a bit like saying you broke the law by speeding. You were doing 102 in a 100 zone, but you actually clinically did break the law by doing 2 kilometres an hour over the speed limit, John.
Yeah, well, look.
Is that helping you out with anything?
More or less. Look, there's some really restrictive bad laws that are designed to never let you win as a union, and if you abide by them laws, you won't win. We defied some of them laws, and we've been criticised for it. But I mean, hardly the crime of the century.
So you weren't happy with the ABCC, what am I talking about? The Australian Building and Construction Commission. You weren't happy with them because of some reason, and you decided then you would dox, I think is the word, dox the people who were part of the commission by sending them letters or standing outside their homes or telling people telling your union members where they lived, and is that vaguely right?
No, look, I had no time for them, and going to their houses and that is absolute. That's never ever happened. There's never been that. That never happened. I mean, people have got families. You don't go to people's houses, But look, we did hate them. They were there to destroy us. They were part of the Howard era government. They sort of denied building workers' rights. They took away our rights. They had secret commissions where you could get dragged in and you had to answer questions. Otherwise, you could go to jail. I mean, a bit like North Korea would be jealous of some of these laws that they had, and they had all these sweeping powers, and it was un-Australian. To be quite honest, it was un-Australian what they did. I mean, this is supposed to be a free country, free speech. We always talk about a fair go for everyone. That's Australia's motto, even though I think that's dissipated, to be quite honest. And they were brought in to sort of really, there was a separate law for construction workers as what there was to other workers. And we thought, how un-Australian is that? So that's why we hated them.
And so you mentioned John Howard, but you were sort of equal-handed with your criticism because you you had a bit of an issue with Kevin Rudd at some stage. I think you said something uncharitable about him. So it was a bipartisan criticism. You weren't just if people did the wrong thing in your eyes, it didn't matter what side of the ledger they came from.
Well, for me, I'm not an apologist for the ALP. If the ALP make a mistake or they do something we don't like, we've been even more critical of them, to be quite honest. I mean, so it doesn't matter what side of politics. I mean, we'll have a crack, and we've been unpopular for that because people have come to me and sort of said, "Oh, you can't say that. I shouldn't say that about." But it's true. "Oh, well, you shouldn't say that." And I said, "Well, you want me to lie?" "Oh," they go, "No." I said, "Well, what do you want me to just say nothing?" So, I mean, the members of the union, they pay my wages to represent them. So they're my bosses. So if we've got a cause or a claim, I mean, I'm obligated to, whether I agree with it or not, if that's what my members want me to do, that's what I do.
Now, Mick Gatto, I presume you're a friend of Mick Gatto's. Mick Gatto said, I know Mick, he said, there'd be a very good chance if you stood to be the Prime Minister of the country, you might actually be surprised at how many people might vote for you.
Oh, well,
what about that?
Thanks. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think
that's probably not going to happen, John, because
but
they go through your background like they go through my background. Whenever I'm after a job, they say, "Oh, well, did you say this and did you do that?" And I say, "Well, I did, but that's a bit the same." But you couldn't stand the scrutiny. But I think theoretically he might be onto something there, John.
I don't think that'll last because I'm too truthful, I suppose. So, I mean, I'll tell the truth, and sometimes people don't like the truth. So
maybe that's what people are looking for in politicians.
I think they are. We call it back to basics, grassroots, and I think some of them have lost that. But look, hopefully one day we'll restore Australia back to what it should be and what it used to be,
So, I don't want to keep bringing up things that you've been accused of, but they're just interesting. It gives you a chance to actually have your point of view. Now, you got charged with blackmailing. Was it Borrell? No, who was it?
Borrell, yeah, Borrell.
How did you get charged? What did you do to be charged? I think you got exonerated, didn't you?
Yes,
you got
the whole
cleared
case
of this.
Yes, whole case collapsed.
So this was a conspiracy theory by the employers to run you out of office and have you running a little scared, but it backfired on them, did it not? Or how did that start, John?
Well, how it started was we had a dispute with Grocon. The good old Grocon used to be around, and it was after the war collapse that killed them three kids. And I sat down and had breakfast with Borrell, to be quite, which I paid for, believe it or not, and had a good laugh and spoke to them about our dramas that we were having. And anyway, 18 months later, they discovered God, as you'd say it. There was a Royal Commission that was on, and Borrell decided to play a political game because there was some American bloke that was out here called Mike Cain, and who reckons he took on the Teamsters and all that. And he went to the Hayden Royal Commission and reckons that we effectively were blackmailing them. And
how were you blackmailing them? What blackmailing them is saying you'll do something if they don't do something. How what did you do?
Well, it was proved that we actually hadn't done anything, but the allegation was that and they were never actually specific on it, right? So what they were actually trying to do is they were trying to make industrial, it'd be like now me sitting
withdrawing your labour from their business, or?
Well, we don't really have people in their business, they sort of supply concrete, but I mean, we sort of spoke to them about we were having a problem with Grocon and they should stay out of it.
You spoke to them, John?
Yeah, we had a
You went down and said, "Hello, gentlemen, how are you going?" Or did you speak severely to them?
No, they requested the meeting. We went to a cafe, the auction rooms, probably the most expensive breakfast I've ever had, which I paid for. And we had a civil conversation, left, shook hands, and that was the end of it. They went back and made a few notes, seen their internal lawyers, and the lawyers go, "Oh, well, there's nothing here." But 18 months later, when there's a political witch hunt that's on, with the Royal Commission, they decided, in hindsight, now on reflection, we think we were blackmailed. So it was all just a political beat-up, which
and you had 2,000 union members didn't storm the court, but they formed a very nice posse outside the court supporting you. and in fact the charges were either withdrawn or you found you had no case to answer, did you?
Yeah, we were at a committal hearing in the Magistrates Court, and it went for about 3 years, this whole thing. And so you're in the media for 3 years. It has you can imagine a detrimental effect on your family. I mean, blackmail's a terrible word. It's almost like I've got a photo of someone.
Well, being a pedophile or something.
Exactly, or a photo of someone doing something with an animal they should be, and I'm trying to extract money out of them. So it's a terrible sort of, that word blackmail is just in itself. And so for 3 years, your family suffers, your kids suffer, your parents suffer, and all. It has an impact on your whole family. When your phone's been tapped for 6 months and every word you've ever said is, you get a suitcase delivered with a whole heap of folders of every conversation you've ever had on the phone. It's a pretty sort of terrible thing to go through, and to be, when the case collapsed in the way it collapsed, and the political interference that was still coming out, and it was just disgusting. We had one person that made about 45 statements before they got it right. The police kept saying, federal police this is, well, look, this statement's not good enough, we can't charge anyone. So he it took him 44 or 45 times before he got it right. Well, that's the sort of stuff that went on, and the whole case collapsed, and pretty disgraceful. And
you got a settlement out of it. Did you
No.
you or the union get a settlement out of it?
No. There was a small settlement on some legal fees, but there's never been a settlement. I mean, Borrell never put their hands up and said, we're sorry for what we did to you and your family, and you drag your name. Like, my kids are going to school, and you got other parents that are too scared to let their kids have a play date because it's all over the news, blackmailers, all sorts of stuff. So it throws your life into, I can handle it, but, the rest of my family, they shouldn't have to have put up with that. Media camped outside your house, all sorts of allegations.
I know what that's like, John.
Yeah, I bet you do.
So you were charged with blackmail, but I noticed this seemed to be a parallel thing. I noticed Jackie Lambie said that she wouldn't vote. She wouldn't vote for a union bill, unless it wasn't passed or whatever. That seemed to be holding Parliament. She was the deciding vote, and she said unless they dropped the union, unless they dropped the piece of legislation that gave the unions a free ride, she wouldn't vote for it. That seemed like blackmail to me as well.
Oh, well, there's all sorts of blackmail. I mean, look, what they were effectively saying, if I sat down with an employer now, when you negotiate and you say, listen, if you don't agree to this EBA that we've put to you, that we've negotiated, we're going to have to be forced to go to protected industrial action. If that case had got up against me, you wouldn't be allowed to do that. So it's like everything you say would be blackmail. I mean, everything, you can go to a supermarket and say, look, we'll sell you this for this much. If you don't, we'll go somewhere else. Well, that'd be seen as blackmail. That's how ridiculous it was, And to put me and my family through the washing machine over that, it is, for me, it's just unforgivable, to be quite honest.
So you've mentioned your family a few times, and I can, as I say, I can resonate with almost everything you say. But as I say, you're far more important and far more probably controversial than me. But how do you shield your family from this? And do you sit down and say to them, look, this is not guilt by association. I do what I do because I do it on behalf of the members. How do they handle it, and how do you tell them to handle the naysayers that they meet in life?
Look, my eldest son was older. He represents a union on site, so he understood. He was all right. But your two younger kids, they sort of you try and shield them. You don't have the news on, like you make sure the TV's not on with the news, and they sort of hear snippets. And when they go to school, kids can be a bit cruel sometimes, but I mean, my kids are pretty proud of what I do. Yeah. They actually once said to me, they don't want me to resign. They love me being the secretary of the union, so they're pretty proud of it. And look, a lot of their teachers at school were very protective of them, which I really appreciated. It was really good. They sort of, they could see through all what was going on, but you can't really protect them from it because it's out in the media. You had the media stalking the school, ringing up the school and asking what time was I coming to pick up the kids from school and all that sort. And thankfully the teachers were fantastic in protecting them, but you can't really protect them, and to live a life where you couldn't even have a conversation in your own house with your wife. We had to go outside and have conversations facing the fence. It's just, you think, gee, what am I, El Chapo or whatever? It was just absolutely ridiculous.
Now, I might get on to conversations you've had with your wife in a minute, John, but So, in a very sensible attempt to get some PR in your favour, I think you enlisted the support of the Richmond Football Club's star and Brownlow medalist Dustin Martin, who is an ally or friend of yours.
Oh, look, I've met him a couple of times. His uncle is actually a delegate of ours that represents a union. So, I mean, I think a couple of his brothers are also CFMEU members that work on site.
Yeah. Well, so, I know. I'd like to say I know Dustin pretty well. He's a very good man, and I've met you once before at a golf charity day out at Woodlands, I think it was, or somewhere. And, it wasn't Woodlands. It was, no, I know it's
the other side of town. Yeah.
Yes, I know. So you got expelled from. I've got a feeling you think men get a rough deal when there's family and domestic issues in courts and legal. They get the rough end of the stick because most people stick with the female side of things. And I think, did you not get expelled from the ALP for some edgy comments you said about Rosie Batty?
Well, I actually never got expelled. I actually took the ALP to court over it, and in the end, I actually resigned over a trade agreement that the ALP had signed. So I actually never got expelled. I resigned on my own terms. Yes, and I had the Prime Minister who came out and talked about comments that I made about Rose Batty, which were completely untrue. There was people in the room that actually weren't friends of mine who said, wouldn't have a problem with it because he never ever said that. So you got
taken out of context.
Taken completely out of context.
We love to do that, the media, John. Well, no, that's clickbait stuff, and so I'm not defending it. I'm just saying you would know that's the nature of anyone that prints or writes or films a story about anyone in the media, in the public arena, that unless it's controversial and salacious, it doesn't sell.
Well, the worst of it was, Sam, where I used to look at Rose Batty on TV, and it was tragically the way her son died, you know. I mean, you know what, as a parent, you wouldn't. And I used to look at it and think, how brave is she to be able to do that, like be able to march out there and do what she's doing. And I sort of thought to myself, would I have the strength to do that after, you know, losing, you know, a child in the manner that she lost a child? So I had this admiration for us, which I still do, and then to be accused of saying that about her, you know, things being taken out of context, for me, it was just I actually ignored it at first because I thought, well, I never ever said that. So I just ignored it. I just couldn't believe the head of steam that happened. And, you know, people that actually weren't my friends, that were my enemies in the meeting, even come out and said, he never said that. We're in the meeting, he never said that. So something untrue, how it could grow legs like that is just, for me, it's just, you know, just when you think you've seen everything, something like that happens.
Yeah, it'd be all indirectly linked to the Me Too movement, and which is a very good movement, but sometimes it's not quite as people think it is. Now, so you've had a bit of a, I would say, not a run-in, I'd say, with your. Is Emma still your ex? Is she your ex-wife?
She's still my wife.
She's still your wife?
Yes, she's still my wife, regardless of media reports that she's not. She's still my wife, yes.
And this is you don't have to answer any of this, of course, John, but how are we going with Emma? It says here it threatened to kill you once. That'd be just a throwaway line like saying, I'll kill you one day, John, and you're a good man, but I've nearly had enough of you. That's how those things start, is it? I noticed she held your hand when she took you to court. I think she held your hand outside the court. Yeah. If that's not a contradiction in terms, I don't know what is. So how are we going there?
Yeah, we're going all right. Going pretty good, yeah. Going pretty, regardless of... if you ask the mainstream media, they'd have a different story.
No, but I'm asking you.
Yeah. No, look, it's all going pretty good. Yeah. It's it's been a rough patch, as... You know, marriages and relationships all go through rough patches.
Tell me about that, will you?
Oh, Jesus.
I've had several goes.
Talk about a rough patch, like a quicksand sometimes. But I mean, it's just one of them things. When a family gets put under pressure, and people are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder from, being in the nature, I was arrested in a car in the back street of North Melbourne with my children on board over these trumped-up blackmail charges, and the way it happened on a Sunday on our way to buy a Christmas tree. It's pretty traumatic for the whole family, and You know, sometimes the person in the eye of the storm doesn't suffer as much, and as has been sort of said to me, I had a support network, you know, you go to work, you got thousands of members that support you, and unfortunately your family hasn't got that sometimes, and they're the ones that really suffer out of it. And there's a whole knock-on effect, and people getting involved and wanting to blow things up into what they weren't. It was just, you know, where people should be putting their arm around you and sort of trying to be supportive, if they just for their own means, you see the worst side of humanity, you know, at a situation like that.
In case people thought I was laughing, I was laughing at your sort of disagreement with your wife. I wasn't laughing at the fact that there was some serious accusations. I was just laughing at the fact that sometimes people don't quite see, and I know this, don't quite see things the way they are. As a result of that, I think you had to embark on a men's behavioural program, did you not? Did the court ask you to do that? And I'm asking you, in case I have to do it, what does that entail, a men's behavioural program?
Well, I done an alternative one, because the men's behavioural one that they get you to do, all the experts told me was a waste of time. And this is over some text messages, which weren't flattering, you know. I'm not sort of proud of that, and I owned up to it. You know, I'm in the old school. If I've done something wrong, I put my hand up and I own up to it, you know. But if I haven't...
This was to Emma?
Yes. In the heat of a thing, you know, you sent a few messages I wasn't proud of and that. But anyway, as husbands and wives do sometimes to one another, I mean, there was nothing threatening or anything like that. But look, there's a bit of bad language. But anyway, I'm not proud of that, and I've owned up to it, and I've put my hand up for it. And yeah, so it's just one of them. But then for the hysteria to then follow, it's almost like I've bashed all these women and kids, and I just don't know where these people, you know, read the facts. I mean, you know, there's been a lot of allegations made about it. It's like I'm the worst person in the world. In the heat of the moment and the pressure that the whole family got put under, I mean, everyone breaks a little bit, you know, and there's no excuse for it. And it's get to the point where you can't even have an argument with anyone anymore, because as soon as you have an argument these days, sometimes it's portrayed as domestic violence, which is a little bit of that woke, you know. I mean, my view is anyone that hurts women and children should be thrown in jail, you know, and I think they'd stop some of the violence that does happen to men and women, predominantly to women and children. I think there's nothing more disgusting than, you know, perpetrators of violence against women and children. But then in the whole thing, you shouldn't make a whole heap of other people suffer because of a handful of people who have done the wrong thing, you know. And I think sometimes the system is not really fair, and people want to get up and talk about equality. Well, you know, equality works both ways, you know. And I think as Australia, we've talked about a fair go for everyone, and that should mean everyone.
So how are you handling, you won't have to handle it at the end of the year, but how have you handled the trend which is coming from overseas about diversity and inclusion and equity and giving people a job on the quota system rather than the meritocracy? And in your industry, which is, I presume, predominantly male-oriented, have you been under pressure from governments and legislative bodies and pressure groups to include certain races and people in your industry just to fill a quota and make everyone feel squeaky clean and virtuous about themselves?
Look, Sam, our industry is pretty multicultural, so there's never been any pressure about, you know, certain minority groups and that. So that's already sorts itself out, and we look after everyone, and we got from all walks of life, and we respect all their religions, their colour. We don't care what colour your skin is, where you come from, who your parents were. If you're a CMFEU member, you're a fellow brother and sister. In regards to the women, we've had a policy of, we've got a lot of women on site. We've got 3 women union officials in our union. We've got a number of shop stewards, delegates as women, and that's increasing. So we've got a lot of women in the building industry, and let me tell you...
They've got there on their merit?
They've got there on their merit. I'm not a big believer... what I am, Sam, is if there's a job going for 10 people and 10 women apply for it and 10 men apply for it, if the 10 women are the best ones for that job, well, they should all get it. You know, there shouldn't be this thing. I believe you should be the best person for the job.
That's the meritocracy.
But our job has been to remove the obstacles for women, because there was obstacles put in place where if you're a man, you didn't have to worry about it. If you're a woman, there was an obstacle there. We've removed all that. And I mean, look, I've got 2 sons and a daughter, and I'd like to think my daughter, if she does end up working on a building site, which is a good career path these days, she'll have the same opportunities as what my sons have, you know, and that's been our job, and we've been pretty successful in that, in pushing that agenda, and the women, let me tell you, some of the women there, you should see them labour. They labour harder than some of the men, and they're pretty staunch. They're pretty hard up, and hey, most of them you'll never leave a room wondering what they're thinking. They'll tell you straight up, and that's what I like about them. And they're good unionists, and they're good people, and they want a good career, and they love the building industry.
And you are their boss, for want of a better word, the people who are in the CFMEU. You run that.
Yeah. Well, I say to them, they're my bosses because they pay my wages, so they're technically my bosses. But
you're charged with running the thing as efficiently and as properly as you can, and you have no problem. And I'm sure you say to them what you'd say to any man.
Look, I'm not into this woke stuff. I mean, this woke thing, I think, is just wrecking the whole world, to be quite honest. And I mean, for me, it's all about equality. And we teach some of our male members. Sometimes you got to watch what you say too. They think something's funny, and we say, listen, pretend you're working. Pretend the person working with you is somebody's mother, somebody's sister, somebody's daughter, somebody's niece. How would you, if it was yours? How would you treat them? And that sort of resonates with people. And we've sort of taught. Look, everything changes. The world doesn't stand still. But I mean, for me, this stuff where. You'll have someone, you've got the old style labourer or carpenter who might say, call a girl, oh, listen, Dale, in a nice way, and people that are retaliated, don't you call me. I mean, come on, you just go to a milk bar. The women in the milk bars call you love. Yes, love, what would you like? I mean, John, you can't say that anymore because you could get sent to Alcatraz or Guantanamo Bay for saying that.
95% of the community agree with that, John, but it's the 5% of people. You would have to be on your guard so that you have people, opportunists, and whether they're men or women, just want to take you to task and for just because you are politically incorrect. Not just you, but this is what's happening all over, and you've got to be so careful about what you say or do when it's tongue-in-cheek and it's actually meant to be a pleasant thing to do. Suddenly it can rebound on you and you think, shit, it wasn't meant to be like that.
Sam, look, I'm that old school. I'll still hold the door open for a woman. People tell me, you shouldn't do that anymore. So why not? That's how I was taught. I'll get up and give my seat up to a woman on a tram, or elderly on the tram, and people have said to me, don't do that. People have been abused for that because they get told I can stand on my own 2 feet. I said, I don't care. I've never been abused. That's how I was brought up. That's what I still do. At the lift at the apartments where I live, I'll even up in the first one there, I'll let the ladies go in first and I hold a lift for them. And I mean, that's how I'm sick of people telling me you shouldn't do that anymore because it's not really politically correct. I said, are you serious?
This is extraordinary, John. People listening to this will think I'm speaking to someone called John Setka, who is actually not the John Setka that they thought that he was. That is the Victorian Secretary of the CFMEU. I noticed the CFMEU's flag now has changed to the Indigenous colours. Was that why did we do that? We used to be the blue and white, and now it's the red, yellow and black.
Yeah, we've still got our normal flags, but we've also done a whole heap of Indigenous flags. We've got a lot of Indigenous members of ours, working on site, and we're sort of at the forefront for, I've done a cultural awareness thing in what's happened to Indigenous, First Nations people, and it's pretty disturbing when you think
what has happened to them.
Oh well, people used to be farmers used to be issued with permits to be able to shoot. Aboriginal people. I mean, the history's pretty bad, for what's happened. And like, people have criticised us. So on our calendar, we have Australia Day. We've put Australia Day and then we've put Invasion Day. And I sort of say to people, it's a bit of an awareness thing, and you might not agree with it, but I mean, I think a lot of them have been sort of unfairly treated. And I think the real story should come out, and then people can move on. They were here before we were, and I'm not into this woke stuff, but I know a lot of Indigenous, good, hard-working Indigenous people, and the stolen generation, where kids were just taken off and they never ever seen them again, and we can only just imagine what that would have been like,
we can imagine what that would be like, but there's a lot of different reasons they were taken off them. And Invasion Day, so you're happy with that term to be called Invasion Day because it's a sort of a divisive thing, isn't it? I mean, we are here today and you do what you do today and lead a successful life because someone came here originally and built the country into what it is. Your people built the country into what it is, didn't they?
Oh, of course they did. But what I'm saying is...
no, you're saying it well, John.
Yeah, what I'm saying is for them, you know, like that day, Australia Day, for some of them, conjures up memories, you know, of, you know, for them. And people, we're sort of trying to make people understand why they would be hostile to it, you know. So we've still got Australia Day written in there, but we've also got Invasion Day just to let people, well, start the conversation, you know, have the conversation.
I think it's a good idea not to have the conversation. The more you talk about it, the more people take sides and become advocates. If we all just stop talking about it, maybe we'd all get on better. And anyhow, John, so we are... Australia is historically a blue-collar country, isn't it? I'm staggered how the Liberals... I'm staggered how Conservative governments ever get into power because we are basically a blue-collar country. Well, and you are at the forefront of that. You have become a hero for blue-collar people, John, not wishing to pump you up any more than people have, or else they'll think this is a soft interview. But I'm just saying to you, I'm staggered how Conservatives ever get into power.
Look, it astounds me too sometimes. I mean, especially when they sort of say, we're going to take all your rights away from you, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and then they go still vote for them. I mean, look, I think in Australia, we've never really had to fight for anything. You know, like other countries in the world, they've had to fight, they've had revolutions, they've had all sorts of things. And I think we're lucky in a way we've never had to fight for something. But because of that, I'd say a lot of people in Australia, we're sometimes a bit politically dumb, to be quite honest. Like, I mean, I hear some policies the ALP put out there and I think, are you fair income? But then I'll hear some of the Liberal policies, I think that's actually not a bad idea. So I think you've got to be... People have actually got to look into it because it's important because it's your future, it's your kids' future, you know, and governments do change countries, you know, and sometimes for the worst and hopefully most of the time for the better. So I just think, I think Australians have got to get a bit more of aware of what's going on with politics and what they're actually saying, because I sometimes think the messaging, and you know, I think politicians have got to get out there and actually say what they actually mean. They all talk in little... you almost need an interpreter to work out what they're saying. So, I mean, just be honest.
That is true.
Yeah, be honest. Just be honest. Go back to your grassroots. Be honest. Tell, like, what's the biggest thing people want to know? Well, what's happening to the groceries? You know, how does a slab of water go up $4 in 2 weeks? I mean, gee, it's petrol's cheaper than water now. I mean, how does this happen, you know? So politicians ought to get out there and sort of call it as it is, you know, and be honest. And they might get a bit of criticism, but... I think being honest and seeing what most Australians want, they would get a lot further than some of the wokey stuff that they do at the moment.
Now, of the people you do battle with, your adversaries, who do you respect? Are you a fair man when you sit down to speak to people, and who generally, on the opposite side of what you're on about, is generally fair with you or the fairest?
Look, Sam, most of our builders and the subcontractors and developers that we deal with, we're pretty fair with them. We've got actually a very, very good relationship with them. You know, there's not many companies out there that, you know, hang shit on the union or... I mean, we have moved... You know, we say to people, I mean, they employ our members. See, a builder employs our members. That subcontractor employs our members. What interest is it for us to send him broke or cost him money? I mean, it's you know, it's like shitting in your own... Why would you do that? So we've got an obligation to look after our members, make sure the jobs are safe, but we also have got an obligation to make sure that job finishes on time. And if you look at these railway crossing removal works that have been going on, I mean, on a lot of them jobs, and you never read this in the papers, they're delivered ahead of schedule and under budget. You know, so, I mean...
Under budget.
Yes.
This is talking about the Westgate Freeway tunnel thing, which is $3 billion over budget.
Level crossings I was talking about.
Yeah, no. So you get on well with those people, but you surely, John, you strike a pretty hard talking point with the benefits and entitlements and the loadings on working and holidays, and you work a pretty tough line with that, which sometimes does send some of the smaller construction people out of business, does it not?
Well,
or is that too dramatic to say that?
That probably is dramatic. We've never seen anyone broke off our wages. I mean, if you look at the housing industry, where we don't cover the housing industry, the housing industry is virtually non-union. They're all collapsing and going broke. I mean, that's got nothing to do with us. I mean, I know they'd love to probably blame us for that, and they probably do, but I mean, that's got nothing to do with us. I mean, what a lot of people don't realise, Sam, is, you know, like some of these house builders, for example, and some of these other construction companies, price jobs 3 years, they price job might not start for another 2 years. You know, materials went up nearly 30%. So all of a sudden, they're doing a job, the price has gone up 30%, they can't go back and say, we want more money out of you. So in the end, it's just easier for them to go broke. And that's what they do. It's got nothing to do with the union. So I know we get blamed for it, but I mean, and in relation to our wage and conditions, we do drive a hard bargain, but we know what the industry can afford. And we sit down with everyone around the table. It's not like the old days, you know, you're kicking down doors and all the rest of it and that, and picket lines. It's very rare to see that, to be quite honest, these days. So we sit down and have negotiations, and most of them negotiations, the last blue we actually had in the construction industry, you know, as an industry, as a whole industry blue, was the 36-hour week when we won that in 2001, you know. Since then, there's been no wholesale blue in the building industry. It's all pretty amicable. We sit down there, we'll argue, and look, we're a bit like a relationship, you know. You got a husband and wife, and or a husband and husband, or whatever. I don't know what you're politically allowed to say anymore. You're allowed to say husband and wife, but I mean, we'll say a couple. Let's say you've got a couple there. You know what? They'll have their little skirmishes. They might not talk for 2 or 3 days. They'll kiss and make up, and they just move on. And that's how it works. And that's what the building industry's like. We'll have our little spats and our little blues, and, you know, people go to their corners and have a little sook and all that. But in the end, we're all stakeholders in this industry. We've got an obligation to make sure our members get good wages, conditions, and more importantly, go home safe. But we've also got an obligation to make sure that job gets delivered on time, on budget, and that all the contractors and the builders actually make money because they employ our members.
Yeah, so you see the construction managers driving the luxury cars and got the holiday beach houses and living the high life, and you say, well, we would like a slice of that, and that's fair enough. And there's only so much money you could want to gather around yourselves. How about sharing it out a bit with the people who make you all this money? That's the fine line between what you do and the management of these construction companies, isn't it?
Oh, exactly. And look, good luck to them. If they're making $50 million and they're driving bigger cars, good luck to them. They employ our members, but as long as our members aren't being ripped off, that's all I ask. Just be fair. Everyone, you know, just got to be fair.
So you said, I've just looked up what this word means. You said you drove an alley Mac. Is that an elevator?
Well, look,
is that an elevator that goes up? Elevator. You see those things that are strapped onto the side of 50-storey buildings, and you think, shit, who would get in that? Someone told me that the first time you got in an alley Mac, this is John Setka. As I'm looking at you now, it looks as though you've got muscles on your muscles. You look like Don Otheldo. You shit yourself when you got in the alley Mac.
Well, look, my first day, grew up in Footscray. We thought we were pretty tough in Footscray. Went on there, my first day on a building site. And I worked on housing, but that's a bit different. I went on a building site, and when I first hopped in the alley Mac, well, walking into a smoker room was a scary experience itself. But I mean, then going into an alley, they call them an alley Mac, them lifts. When this thing started going up, this is like 1984, I tell you what, you had to act tough for that. I thought this thing was going to fall off the side of the building. I just wanted to scream. This thing just rattled and rolled. I mean, they're pretty rough today. Back then, it was like something out of the Flintstones, and I just go to myself, we don't get paid enough for this. This is, you know, and then you get used to it like everything else. But and they were pretty safe. But yeah, the only other lift you've ever been on is an internal lift of a building, and then you hop in one of them and you think, oh my God.
Is Mick Gatto a colleague, or is he work in the same general area as you, or does he settle disputes on your behalf, or do you use him as an advocate for you, or are you separate people?
No, he's got his own business. He's arbitrations and mediations, and what will happen is people, if they've got a bit of a problem, they don't know how to go through it, they'll either go to an employer organisation, but what a lot of them do, that they'll go to Mick, and Mick's got a lot of contacts there. He's got a good nature about him, regardless of what they write about him. He's actually got a good nature. He's an absolute gentleman. You can sit down with him, you can talk. He'll listen to both sides of the story. And you know, we've had cases where he's brought in a company. We've had a few problems with, and once we have the little argument there, if he feels the company's actually, they weren't fair and weren't doing it, he'll pull them up and say, listen, even though you're paying me, you're not doing the right thing. You've got to fix that. You can't do that anymore. You've got to pay these people properly. You've got to do that. So he's more or less, he's a mediator, an arbitrator, and he goes in and he's got a very good success rate in sorting out disputes.
Now, John, as always, when I finish speaking to people, we get off, we turn all this off, and someone says, why didn't you ask him this? Or, geez, didn't you know he did this? And I say, well, shit, thanks for telling us now. I don't know what I've forgotten to ask you. Someone will say you haven't asked him the main things about what makes him tick. All I'm just going to say, you thinking when you're going on a holiday when this is all over? Do you travel overseas? Are you well regarded in the union movement overseas? Do you have colleagues over there? And you might take the missus over. This could be just a great panacea to bring you both together again, and you could take her overseas and let bygones be bygones, and things might go from just go into the atmosphere. It might be fantastic.
Might be absolute bliss, yeah. I don't really know what I'm sort of going to do. I mean,
do you fish?
I do. I used to fish. I used to have I had 2 boats at one stage. I used to love fishing, and it used to cost me about $4,000 a kilo for flathead because boats aren't exactly cheap. Right? Anyway, and look, I've always sort of said, then you get busy when you become the secretary, and I got rid of the boats, and I wouldn't mind getting a boat again, and going out and doing a bit of fishing, or maybe just by the banks of the Barrongalong River and just throw in a rod and just relax a bit. But
and I've got a feeling golf's not your long suit, because with arms like that, mate, you've got to have flexibility and rhythm.
Well, my son likes golf, and we went somewhere through a shooting range once, and I said, give me 100. He goes, Dad, it's too many. Just give me 100. Let me tell you, I swung about 20 of them. I said to him, you don't know what I said to him. I gave him the bucket and the golf clubs, and he said, I told you it was too many. I went down, I used to smoke, and had a cigarette and a beer. And the next day I had muscles that I didn't even know I had were absolutely killing me. So I've not touched the golf club since. So, and I'll take my hat off to him, because you actually got to be physically, it does test your muscles. But yeah.
Anyhow, John, Setka, you're an engaging man, and your reputation precedes you, like all our reputations precede us. But it's been a delight to chat to you. I don't know if people will think, oh, gee, like they always say, oh, you've gone easy on. I don't know how I've gone easy. What are other questions I could ask you? But it's been fantastic of you to come in. I really appreciate it, because you must shy away from dickheads like me who and people who want to just chat to you and try and upend you, and we're not trying to do any of that. We just like to ask you the questions, and your answers are the most important. So thank you very much for coming in.
No, my pleasure. Thanks very much, Sam. Thank you.